Welcome again. Today we have I think, much needed talk about relationships in cancer. I know that I had some strange relationships when I was diagnosed. I'm absolutely delighted to have Sarah Guy talk to us today. Yes. Sarah is a qualified psychotherapeutic counsellor, and she works with the Birmingham-based cancer charity, which is called Help Harry Help Others. She's the head of counselling, and she oversees a range of services for cancer patients and their families, which includes emotional support, financial benefits, advice, and holistic therapies, plus peer-led groups. She's going to bring her experience as a clinical supervisor and her former role as a Birmingham hospice to this workshop. I very much am looking forward to what she has to say. As I say, I think it's very much needed, and we should be talking about this a lot more. So thank you very much, Sarah, for agreeing to give us this talk, and over to you.
Hello and welcome to everyone. It's so lovely to see everybody come in this evening, and lots of people really early, so well done for that. I'm in Birmingham in the UK, and we're at the point of having a bit of a flood outside the window. So I am on my own now at the end of the day, hoping that I shall be able to get to my car and get out of the building. We've just had the most awful storm. So I hope the weather and where you are is treating you a bit kinder than me. So thank you very much, Sarah, for inviting me. It's my pleasure to talk about relationships and the impact of cancer. I work a lot with clients with cancer, family members, and I also run support groups with patients with cancer. And relationships comes up time and time again. I am a relationship counsellor, so it's kind of something that I'm interested in, but also we're going to look a bit wider than just sort of, your traditional romantic relationship today. So for any of you that are in the UK and anywhere around the world, you can have a look at our website. The details are at the end. And we offer a range of services here, but we have a very big counselling division here, and we offer a lot of emotional support. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, we are going to just talk about what do we mean by a relationship. I always like to define things because we all feel that we understand it. Sometimes we don't. And then actually, before we actually come on to cancer, I'm going to talk about what makes a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. One of the things I learned training as a counsellor, and I worked in child protection services and family support services for a number of years, is that when you ask this question to people, what makes a healthy or an unhealthy relationship? It's not something, particularly in the UK, that's my only point of reference, where it's taught at schools, talked about, and we spend a long time in counselling talking about, what are the components of relationships, and then we'll come on very much to look at cancer and how this impacts on relationships. And as I go through, I'll share some of the feedback and the experiences that I've had. We're going to talk a lot about boundaries. And those are really important in personal relationships, and something that I had no clue about until I trained as a counsellor, and they're incredibly important. And I'm also going to give you a few tips for what we call assertive communication. So how can we communicate our needs and our boundaries, but how can we do it in the right way? And then we will talk about managing setbacks, because we're human beings. We get tired, we get irritable, and even the best relationships at times can be difficult and can be tricky. So that's today's session for you. Hopefully you will find it really interesting, and hopefully you will gain something from it. So what is a relationship? And we are talking today very much broader than husband, wife, partner, romantic relationships, but it's a connection or an association or an involvement. And one of the things that strikes me when I'm working with the support group is how many additional people you will come into connection with if you are the patient or even the family member of somebody with cancer. So, you know, in the UK, we have consultants, specialists, doctors, um, all sorts of nurses, all sorts of different levels of individuals that you will come into connection with. So one of the things cancer often does is widen the range of people that you deal with. And whilst they might not be close, familial, everyday relationships, you are very much going to be connected with different people from the medical profession, particularly, maybe counsellors, maybe benefit support. And these will also be relationships that will be quite crucial. So obviously a connection between persons by blood or marriage. So, you know, we often think of families, we often think of marriage, an emotional or another connection between people, and obviously a sexual involvement or an affair. But today we're going to talk in the broadest sense about all the people that we come into to contact with. And sometimes, and again, individuals may vary, sometimes the people that are closest to you, who you might assume will be the most supportive, sometimes struggle. So it's important to look at other connections that we can have. So types of relationships. So, you know, we tend to think of family. I want to point out that not everybody has family, wide family, extended family, or has come from a stable family background. So for me, although there's a definition here, family often means the people that you consider your family that are closest to you. In a traditional sense, we are talking about parents, siblings, maybe extended family members, uncles, aunts, grandparents, children, or a partner and a spouse. And again, family and the definition of family is interesting. Friends, we have different levels of friendship with different people. You know, you might have your work friends. Are they colleagues? Are they friends? Some of them might become friends. You may have close friends. You may have school friends that you still keep in touch with. I always feel quite jealous when people talk about the school friends because I don't have any left. I don't know what that says about me, but I have got other friends. So we have lots of different levels of friendships, and often we go to different friends for different things. What is rare in life, even in romantic relationships, is to get all your needs met from one person. That's quite difficult. And I think, you know, when it comes to cancer care, one of the things that I've most noticed is it feels like the team of connections broaden. And sometimes people will find friendships through support groups, through chemotherapy sessions, through different means. Other types of relationships I want to flag up is acquaintances. They could be through work or social clubs, friends of friends. But again, and it's very hard to define where we put them, different levels of medical staff will come in somewhere within all of these areas and can be quite key. When I worked at Birmingham Hospice, we had they're called in this country Macmillan nurses or you know, cancer care nurses. We have all sorts of different titles for them, but they can become really essential in how people navigate this journey. And then people who access services from your dentist, we obviously mentioned medical staff, school staff, hairdresser. And it's really interesting because those people get drawn into your cancer journey, you know, and we have lots of conversations about, oh, been to the dentist, obviously I had to discuss the treatment I'm having, the school staff where my children go, you know, the teacher might have an interest, hairdresser, you know, someone who's known you a long time. So your relationships are wide and varied. And really that is the point of the slides that we have here. There are different levels of relationships, and we can all make our own judgments on the closeness of our relationships via our levels of connection and our feelings about these people. What I think comes up time and time and time again when we run particularly support groups for patients with cancer is that sometimes the people that you would have anticipated would have been the people that would have been right by your side and closest to you don't always cope well. And sometimes the friends that might be a little further remote in your social circle might actually really come forward. One of the things that I usually say to people is I think friends in particular is like car insurance. We only actually know that they're a good friend when we need them. And if ever you've had a car accident and been unfortunate enough to, you only know when your car insurance is good when you actually need it, you know, whatever the policy says. So just lots about sort of the basis of relationships here. So we have, so I'm just going to admit someone, I can see somebody waiting. So we have different levels. This is just an example. What I often do as a counsellor when I'm working people and trying to get to know people and trying to understand their key relationships in their life is I have a big circle on a piece of paper and we put you in the centre, and then we have lots of sort of widening circles for different levels of relationships and friendships. And it's a really interesting exercise because you can see very visually at a glance who are the people that are closest to you and who are people that the neighbour might be really important to you, but may not be as close as someone else. I'm not that clever with technology, so I've done it in a pyramid for this. So family might be the top of your pyramid, the most special people. Then you might have friends, then you might have acquaintances. It's very individual and it's very much determined on your experiences. One of the areas that I find is very difficult when we're counselling and supporting people with cancer is those people that are quite isolated, maybe don't have a wide family or many family members, maybe have limited friends. We often get people that have been married for a long time and are widowed, and then they hit cancer. And that's where the sort of support services we offer here, which is drop-in and connection, can be really important. So if you don't have the circle of people to support you, sometimes it is looking at organisations and support groups, because I think most people that go through cancer would say it's important to have connections and support. But sometimes we have to seek those if we don't have them to hand, because being isolated and being lonely with cancer is incredibly difficult. Okay, doesn't want to move. Let's be patient. Okay, let me try this down here. It's all going too well. There we go. So what makes a healthy relationship? So if this wasn't a webinar, I would ask you this question. And here are some of the things that, you know, research and people that have looked into the quality of relationships have determined. And again, you know, I think probably most of these you would accept. There might be some that you would argue with. But this is based on research. When we train as a relationship counsellor, we do a lot of work learning about relationships and learning about studies and what people much cleverer than me have said about what makes a healthy relationship. You might think this is really obvious. However, my experience is it isn't. And I ask this question time and time and time again in the counselling that I do here, not just in relationship counselling, when we're talking about people in their lives. And people find this really hard. So I think there has to be a respect, and I think mutual respect is really, really what we're aiming for here. And empathy is very different from sympathy and pity. And you will probably know this if you are the patient, depending on people's responses when you tell them that you have cancer. So empathy is the ability to see it from somebody else's frame of reference. Not what it's like for my life, but how is it for you? This is how we work as counsellors. We try and put ourselves into the shoes of the clients and see their life through their experiences, their position, their connection. Sympathy is a bit remote. Sympathy is I'm over here and you're there, and I'm very sorry that's happening to you, but it's not really touching my life. Empathy is I'm really trying to understand what it's like for you, and you'll probably have had a number of different responses from different people over time. Equality is always great in relationships. and shared control. So that sense that, you know, sometimes I take the lead, sometimes you take the lead. You know, I might support you through a difficult time. You might support me when I'm going through a difficult time. And good communication. One of the myths, I think, in relationship counselling is that good communication is the answer to everything. It's only really a part of the journey, but it is really important. And one of the things that we do is we assume people know how we feel because they should. And quite often people don't unless we tell them. But also we have to be clear, and we'll have a look at that with assertive communication. How can we be clear with people so that there aren't so many misunderstandings? I'm very well aware that people join these sessions from all over the world, which is a little scary, quite exciting at the same time. So I am trying to think about some of the language that I use to make that accessible to you. You know, we all have slang and dialect and words that we use. So we have to think about the words that we use. Validation of your authentic self. Oh, my goodness. That's about as wordy as I ever get. I like things straight and straightforward. What does that mean? It means being able to be yourself, faults all. We're human. We're not perfect. We get tired. We get cranky, even us counsellors. You know, we have good days, we have bad days. But it's people that kind of accept us in our authentic self. So not a bit thinner, not a bit fatter, not without the tattoos, not with your hair a different shade, just accepting you. And the idea in romantic relationships is that two authentic people that are comfortable in themselves and self-reliant then enhance each other's world. So authenticity, being yourself. Trust, I think probably if I'd have asked the question, you might have said that to me. Mutuality and independence. So one of the things that we think is really important is that you don't have to live in somebody's pocket, that you can be separate people, whether it's friends, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's family, that you can have independence, but you can then come back to each other and enhance each other. And then boundaries that are maintained. And I'm not going to say too much about boundaries because I'm going to come on and talk about boundaries in a minute. So I'm keeping an eye on the time and feeling safe. You know, when you're going through cancer, it's scary and the world feels unsafe. And we don't have the same level of control and autonomy over our own lives. And suddenly we're not relying on our friends and family as much as the medics, the cancer care specialists, the nurses. You know, we have to put a lot of trust in them. And it can make the world feel incredibly unsafe. So, you know, that sense of safety as much as you can have. One of the ways that they describe our centre here is like a big comfort blanket and a safe place to be, where you can just be how you're feeling. And I think that's incredibly important. So very, very briefly, unhealthy relationships. Those are them that have disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, a lack of trust, any sort of mistrust, power imbalance, you know, is not good. A good relationship has give and take and equality. Inauthentic. So, you know, I'm not really being myself with you. I'm hiding part of myself. I'm masking off part of myself. I presented myself at the start as somebody different than I really am. Poor communication, and we'll come on to have a look at some communication tips, because what I'd like to do is just give you some things to think about, some practical things to take away, and there might be things that you think, I want to read up more about this. This is interesting. Lack of independence, lack of consideration for boundaries, and we'll come on and talk about boundaries. Lack of empathy. You know, some people don't naturally have empathy. It's a skill that not everybody has. And sometimes there are certain people that find it really difficult. And if you're going through a really difficult time like cancer, and the other person isn't empathizing with you, that's really difficult, because then it can feel very isolating and very lonely. And any relationship that's controlling or abusive. What I will say to you is that the quality of relationships doesn't suddenly improve because one person has cancer. It's a little bit like, I think, when you have a baby, if you're in a couple, it puts a lot of pressure on that relationship. So the idea that a baby draws everyone together, the reality tends to be actually that's an additional level of pressure. And so sometimes when a patient has cancer, they have an expectation that somebody who might fit into the more unhealthy relationships category is suddenly going to reverse how they are. And that's not always the case, sadly. We think that everybody will give us what we need, but that isn't always the case. So if a relationship isn't serving your needs, it's worth having a look at how was it before and what are the areas that we might need to address. So relationships work on a continuum. So from high quality at one end to poor quality in the other, and everything in between, from healthy to unhealthy, and then to abusive and relationships that are not good. And we all strive for high quality, healthy relationships. The reality is that you probably have a range of different relationships, particularly when you come into somewhere like the work environment, where you're perhaps foisted with people that you don't know very well. You know, you might meet people that are empathic and manipulative and aren't honest. So for most of us, where we want to be is high quality and healthy, particularly with friends and family. Sometimes we can have a choice, particularly around our friendships. But a lot of people at some point in their life may feel that they're in a poorer quality relationship. Okay, so how does cancer impact relationships? So most relationships don't significantly improve because one person has a diagnosis of cancer. We often expect them to. And sometimes one of the things that we do with clients is manage their expectations. And we hear it time and time again. I really thought they would pull through, they would change, they'd be more available to me. Now, I can't say that never happens. Of course, I can't. But sometimes we have to manage our expectations, and sometimes we have to be disappointed that it may not come from the person we most hope, but we then have other people that will then perhaps meet the needs that we're not getting from some of the main relationships. It changes the dynamic of a relationship. And of course, it puts stress on a relationship. Our service here was born out of a little boy called Harry, who very sadly died of a brain tumour when he was 11. And he'd started doing a bit of fundraising before he died, and his mum carried on and built the service around the things that were stressful for a family, but things that weren't really answered. The medical needs were answered, but some of the other things weren't. So, you know, it puts stress on you financially quite often, you know, particularly if one person has to come out of work or take time off work or take time off to be there for someone else. Emotionally, you know, most people would describe it as a really difficult journey, a roller coaster, a very hard place to be. And when people go through a cancer diagnosis, they often go through a loss and grief cycle. And we'll look at that a little bit later on. But what that means is you will feel all sorts of emotions. And that can be difficult. It's very difficult anyway. You know, somebody's grieving, that can be difficult for other people to be around, but it can make it particularly challenging. And of course, physically. One of the things I learned most working in the hospice was how difficult cancer is on the carers, whether that's, you know, husband, wife, children, family members, friends. The physical demands, the expectations that we have sometimes in the UK, that, you know, you suddenly feel like you're being a nurse, you know, just the 24/7 not being able to shut off can have a huge demand, not only on the patient, but also on the carers that are there looking after them. Cancer, sadly, often highlights poor quality relationships because it focuses a spotlight on the relationship as one person might need more from the other. We had a lady that came in recently, and of course I won't name any names, it will all be confidential. And she would admit, I think, a lady in her late 50s, early 60s, that her relationship, her marriage, long standing, was very separate. They were sort of like ships that passed in the night. They sort of went to work, they lived their own lives independently. They didn't hate each other, but it wasn't a close marriage. You put into that cancer and the fact that she couldn't work and she couldn't get out and she was reliant on the other person, and it was very, very difficult because that other person wasn't providing the needs and found that hard. So, you know, these are some of the stories that come into us in the counselling room. People can change who they are and they can see life differently because of the journey of cancer. When we run the support group, one of the things that we say to people is, how has this enhanced affected your life? You know, what have you learnt from having cancer? And it's quite a hard question, and we don't do it early doors. You know, we make sure we've got a good relationship with the people in the group. But for some people, it can be life changing in a way that maybe they've made necessary changes to their life. Maybe they weren't happy in their job. Maybe the relationship wasn't working out. And almost, you know, having cancer has really given them a different perspective. You know, so it changes people. And I think that can be hard for the people around someone with cancer. People don't usually go into cancer and come out the same person. You know, the impact of the treatment and the risk to your life and the lack of control and all of those effects will often change somebody, and often the people around that person find it hard to adapt. Primarily, we're not always keen on change as humans. You know, some of us struggle with it more than others, and you know, somebody grows and changes, that can be difficult. And the other person in relationship, they're not always able to cope with how someone's changed. So, you know, it can put a real test on relationships. It can really solidify relationships. It can bring new relationships into your life, but it can also be testing. Okay, every now and then it doesn't want to new slide. There we go. So what is good communication? And I'm just going to move Shara up because you're just in the way of my slide. There you go. I can see you up in my corner. So the problem with communication, and we all do it, and when you taught counselling, you taught how to listen, and you think, well, I know how to listen, but actually we don't. So good communication is about listening as much as it is about the delivery of the message. What we often do is we interrupt, or we find a solution, or we advise. That's how life is, isn't it? We interrupt with that, oh yes, when that happened to me, because we want to bring ourselves in. People, when you have cancer, always want to find a solution. Counsellors don't provide solutions or advice. We help you to work through and make decisions and have autonomy. Because you've probably heard solutions a million times over, or you've had very conflicting advice. So sometimes what people appreciate most about coming to a centre like this, coming to counselling or a group, or just getting together with other clients, is when they are listened to without somebody trying to silver line it and make it better for them. And I would say, if you're not the person with cancer and you're a relative, avoid the silver linings. Well, it could be worse. Could be worse. So, you know, you're having a lumpectomy on your breast, but you're not having a breast removed, so it could be worse. Or, you know, it could be worse. At least your children have grown up. Or, you know, it could be worse. People younger than you get cancer. Those are things that we say because we don't know what to say. They don't generally make other people feel better. The empathic response, and empathy comes down a couple down, is that sounds really difficult for you. You know, what does that bring to your life? How are you coping? Rather than, oh, well, you know, they can do wonderful things now, so I'm sure it'll all be fine. It's just about listening, and don't feel the need to interrupt. allow them to have their say. We know from counselling how much when you talk and you share your narrative and you share your stories, how it helps the person with the story or with the cancer to process, for their brain to process what they're going through. And the brain is a wonderful organ, but sometimes it takes time for them to go through a process and process it. And sometimes people don't need clever answers. And sometimes there are no clever answers. When I worked in a hospice, I would often counsel and work with people that were dying. There's no clever answer to that, but they just wanted someone to listen and walk that difficult journey and to understand how it felt for them. So always validate the feelings of the other person. You'll see this in life. We do the, oh, I'm feeling sad today. Well, what have you got to be sad about? The sun shining. Or don't be sad. Don't cry. Let's get the tissues and a cup of tea and let's stop that. One of the most important things is that there are no bad feelings. There are just feelings and they're information and they're valid. So if someone's saying to you, I feel depressed, I feel like there's no hope, I feel sad, validate them. I can hear that's how you're feeling. What's led you to feel like that? And you might ask, is there anything in your life that brings you moments of hope? But don't try and convert, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. Let's make you feel better. Just validate how they're feeling and empathise. I can see that's difficult. That feels a real challenge for you. How is that affecting your life? Sometimes it can be really helpful. It's a little bit of counselling skills, but it's really interesting when you just reflect back what you've heard. You don't need to go into big depth, but what I'm hearing is at the minute is there's a lot of uncertainty and you don't know what the treatment's going to be and you don't know what the result of the scan's going to be. And you've just said how much that's worrying you. What that does is it tells the other person that you've listened and you've heard them. And it's really powerful, really powerful. I've heard what you've said, I've paid attention, and I'm listening to what it's like for you. And that comes very much into your empathising. Check your understanding. One of the things that, and I've learned a lot of things that I don't always wish I knew about cancer and treatment and different cancers and diagnosis and prognosis. And often as a counsellor in a cancer care centre, they assume that I'm a medic and I know everything about cancer. I don't. I'm skilled in counselling. I don't know everything medically. That's not my job. So I have to check that I've understood. Just tell me that bit again. And so you said is it an MRI or is it a CT scan? And again, it shows the person that you're interested and you're listening and you're paying attention. And these are really simple things, but they're so valid. And when people come to the end of counselling, or we do a befriending service, or we do a group, so these are some of the things that people appreciate more than anything. And even if you have cancer, you don't fully know what someone else is going through because we all have our own journey, our own relationships, our own history with childhood and mental health and personality. So, even two people with the same cancer will often have a very different experience. And respect an adult's autonomy. This, I guess, goes out to sometimes the families and the carers. We had a support group once where it suddenly became a little unhelpful. It was a support group for ladies with breast care, and one of the ladies who'd had a really long battle had decided not to go through chemotherapy because it wasn't going to cure her. It was only going to increase her lifespan slightly, and she'd had such a difficult time. And very well meaning other people in the group were like, no, come on, you've got this, come on, there's other things, there's trials. And although they were being really helpful, that lady was an autonomous adult who thought long and hard about her decision, who'd spoken to her husband and spoken to her children. And actually what they'd lost in that moment was that respect for this is her journey and her choice. Sometimes here I get really challenged by, we've recently had a cancer care patient that's not wanted to go on any treatment for 2 months. They've been in real shock, but it's their choice. And although I find that challenging and we're supporting them and talking to them, it's their autonomy and their choice. So, allowing somebody's autonomy can be really powerful, especially in cancer, because you have a lack of control as a patient over the treatment, over the journey of the cancer, over will that chemotherapy work. So we try as much as we can in counselling and at the centre to give people their autonomy. Okay, are you going to move? It's very, yes. So just a little bit, and I am keeping an eye on time, Shara, don't worry, about personal boundaries. It's something that the first time before I became a counsellor said, you don't really have personal boundaries. I had no concept what on earth she was on about. And I was a people pleaser and a workaholic, and I'd do everything for everyone else, and I would burn myself out. And actually, that's exactly what happened to me. I burnt myself out. And she talked to me about personal boundaries, and I was like, okay, so what is a personal boundary? And a personal boundary are the limits and rules that we set for ourselves within relationships. And actually, and I know you might all roll your eyes at me and I can't see you because I'm looking at my slides. A person with healthy boundaries can say no to others when they want to, and people find that really difficult. But I think particularly if you're a patient going through cancer, you have to look at your boundaries. What can you cope with? What are your needs and how much you can do? People with boundaries are also comfortable opening themselves up and being vulnerable, which takes great strength to intimacy and close relationships. So if it will move on. There we go. So how do we set boundaries? And this is a massive topic, but there are some great websites out there that will talk to you all about this. But really, we kind of decide on your values and beliefs in the relationships that you have and what you're comfortable with. So for me, and if you see me clicking, I'm just admitting someone, I don't know if Shara can see them, there's still some people coming through. For me, I have quite an important value about work. I have to be careful I don't work too much. But for me to do this when work goes home at 5 o'clock, and this is outside of my time zone, I'm really happy to do that. I live on my own. My dog's been to daycare. Yes, he has a better social life than me, so he'll be dropped home. He'll be okay till I get home unless the thunder starts again. My values are, this is really important. I believe a lot in the charity, so I'm happy to do this. Somebody else might have a value of family first, maybe have young children, maybe have people waiting at home for them. And actually their boundaries might be, I don't work outside work times. That's my contracted hours. And so we're not all the same. We all have different values and beliefs in relationships, and it's individual. So it's about identifying and defining what your boundaries are. So if you think about, somebody who might treat you with disrespect, how do we accept that? Are we okay, the first time if we know they're having a bad day and they're quite disrespectful to us? But again, I'm a manager here. If somebody kept being disrespectful, I would have to put my boundaries in, and I'd have to say, it's one of my boundaries that I like a level of respect, and I don't feel comfortable with this, and this is how I want things to change. So we have to communicate them, but we don't have to over-explain or justify. So particularly when working hours are contracted, if Shara had met with me and said, will you do this at 6 in the evening because it suits different places around the world, and I'd gone back to my boss and said, I can't do that, she wants me to work outside my hours, I might want to give a small explanation, but actually those are my working hours. This is outside my working hours. This is not something I'm able to do. And be clear and to the point, and stay on what you prefer rather than what you do not like. So I could have said to Shara when we first met a couple of months ago, Shara, I've got responsibilities at home. It's really important for me to be home on time. However, I would be more than happy to do it at this time. Yes, if everybody can't come, then it will be recorded. So hopefully that will work out. If you stay on what you prefer rather than I don't like that you're asking me to work outside that can be a little bit threatening. But yeah, I don't mind doing it now, but actually this isn't going to work. One of the things that we find very difficult is setting consequences when people transgress your boundaries. That just means when they keep stepping over the line. And it's a little bit like behaviour management with children. If you don't have consequences and you have rules and you don't enforce those rules, the children will just carry on doing what they like, because mom says that, but she doesn't mean it. So, you know, it might be, you know, I have asked you today actually not to talk about the cancer. I want to have coffee and talk about my dog, the walk, and other things. And every time we meet, you bring the cancer in, and I actually need this as a time out. So maybe I'm going to cut this coffee break short, or maybe I'm not going to come every week because it's too much for me. So you have to have consequences that we explain to people, and we have to be able to carry those out, and that's not easy. And I think most of us would say we're a work in progress. We often imagine that people know how we feel or should understand what we're going through without telling them. And you know what? Sadly, most people can't read minds. And if we just communicate it non-verbally by shutting ourselves off, being a bit sad, being a bit sulky, I mean, we can all do it. People don't always know what's going on. And I've done this when I trained counsellors. I used to train counsellors, and we would get people to act out feelings. People would often get them wrong. So, you know, you have to go into detail you don't want to. But actually, when somebody says to you, "How are you?" "I am fine," is probably inaccurate, that should say. And actually, it's okay to say, "It's not the best day today, but I'm doing okay and I'm getting through." Or, "I'm struggling today, I'm in a bit of pain. So actually, I might only join the support group for half an hour today." You know, people don't tend to know unless we tell them. We don't have to give them long explanations. But what we often do, well, we certainly do it in Britain: "I'm fine. How are you?" "I'm fine. I'm fine." You know, and actually then we get upset when people can't read us and don't know how we're feeling. So it's okay to tell them how you're feeling. And often we get frustrated when we feel that other people don't understand. And then people can't support your needs if they think you're okay and you're not telling them. So just honest, clear responses. Just, "This is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling quite sad today, but it will pass. But today is a sad day, and, you know, I'm feeling anxious because I've got chemotherapy tomorrow." So just some tips for being assertive. And I am coming up, I'm working through it now because I'm aware of the time in case anyone wants to ask questions. It's really hard. Assertiveness did not come naturally to me. And a few years ago, I was working in an organisation before becoming a counsellor where I used to deliver courses to parents. And they got me to do the assertiveness training course. That's because clearly I needed to learn. So you can learn, and it's about practice. And it's about practicing in small steps before you try, you know, the more difficult characters and relationships in your life. But be calm and confident. When we raise our voices, the other person raises the voice, and we raise our voice and we raise our voice. One of the things that I've learned most working here, and I've had to have some incredibly difficult conversations with patients and at the hospice, is trying to stay calm and confident. I don't always feel it, but actually just keeping that calm, even tone can really help bring the level down of a conversation that's difficult. And make sure your body language matches. So if you're trying to keep your voice calm, but you're very tense and you're like this and you're not looking at them and maintaining eye contact, they're going to get the feeling that actually, you know, that it's a mismatch. So, you know, relaxed, calm body posture. And it's all about a skill. Being assertive is a skill. So if this doesn't come naturally to you and you think, "Oh my gosh, I really need to be assertive with that cancer nurse or that consultant," try it around the people that you feel most comfortable with first, and little challenges first. Use I statements. They're less accusatory. If I say, I would have preferred Shara to have started at 4 o'clock this afternoon so I could be home now, that might feel different to, you made me start at 6 o'clock and that's not really comfortable for me. It has a very different feel. I takes away that you've made me feel, because you're acknowledging yourself. I would like to be on a late shift tomorrow because I'm always on an early shift, rather than you put me on the early shift every day. The broken record technique saves my life many times in my life. And that is just repeating the same statement until someone hears it. I would like you to work late tonight. I'm unable to do that tonight. I have plans. Yes, but we're really short staffed and there's no one else to do it. I'm unable to do that this evening. I've got plans. Yes, but Cassidy did it last time and Barry's going to do it next time. And you're the only person. I'm unable to do that this evening and I've got plans. And you just keep it calm and you keep repeating it back, and it can be just really powerful. Be direct, clear, and to the point, and ask for feedback. Now, this one is a bit scary. So you assert yourself, I'm unable to do that. I have plans. Okay, then, well, we'll have to shut early. Okay, so what does that mean to you to have to shut early? Or how are you receiving the message that I've just said? How did that come across? Sometimes we think we're being assertive and we're not, and we fool ourselves. So if it's someone close to you, how was that conversation with my brother-in-law? Do you think I kept calm? How did it come across? Because it's a skill. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of feedback. Learn to say no. And if you can't say no, learn it, but do it for the small things first, the little tiny things that aren't huge things. And if you find no difficult, try. Not now, it's not possible. Not unless, not that, but I could do this. Not at the present time. I'm unable to commit to this at this present time, and use the broken record technique. Learning to say no is about protecting your needs and well-being, and it's liberating, but it's hard. And I have this with many clients, and never shy away from the idea of counselling, because it can be really helpful. And we can do a bit of role play in the sessions, and then we can start setting some little challenges. And what you learn when you say no is you think that person's going to be angry, annoyed, and the world's going to stop. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. And they go, oh, okay. And they go and ask someone else. So it's not easy. It's a work in progress. Again, and I'm aware of time, there's something called the bear technique, that when you're being assertive, you talk about the behaviour you don't like rather than the person. People get defensive when they feel they're attacked personally. If I said to Shara, and I'm using Shara all evening this evening, so it's a good job she's there, when you clearly weren't paying attention when I needed to bring you in, what was the effect it had on me? That made me feel a bit scared and unsupported. So as a consequence, I doubled some of my words and it wasn't as clear as it could be. When you talk about someone's behaviour, and I used to teach behaviour management with kids, and it goes very much to that. We focus on the behaviour, not the person. They're less likely to go into that defensive mode that then can heighten up things. So it's just a really simple reminder about behaviour. Keep it personal to you again with the I statements. This is the effect it's had on me. This is the result. This is the action, and this is the result. So you keep it from your frame of reference. People go through a journey of loss and grief when they are diagnosed with cancer, and probably to some degree so do close family and friends and close people having a relationship. If you've never been through loss and grief, we traditionally think of it when we lose somebody and somebody dies. This is some of the way that we go through it, and it's messy and it's difficult. People have to come to terms with a diagnosis. So if you are the person around somebody, do not be surprised if they go into a bit of shock and denial. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it, because if I talk about it, it makes it real. There might be some pain, and we have something called emotional pain as well as physical pain. There might be some guilt. Maybe I've brought this on myself. I shouldn't have done this. Have I done that? Was it something that I did? And most people go through an angry stage, a frustrated stage, angry at the cancer, angry at the doctors if they haven't got the magic answers, angry at themselves. And yes, the people around them that they feel safest with might sometimes be on the receiving of that anger, and it's very gently, I can hear that you're angry, but actually this isn't about what's just happened and I haven't washed the dishes. Let's talk about this. This is bigger. Sometimes people slip into depression. And yes, I would say it, but for those of you, family, friends, patients, it's great to have some counselling, because sometimes you're all too emotionally involved with each other. What's really nice about using a counsellor is that counsellor isn't emotionally involved. You've not got to see them at the breakfast table. You've not got to work with them. And you can then be honest. So I've had many carers go in, I can't cope with this any longer. And they can, but they need to say it out loud. They need someone to understand how hard it is. They don't want to say it to the patient because the patient can't help being ill. So yeah, we navigate it. It's not a linear process. It's not something that we naturally go along and then come to the end. And it can be messy. And one day you might feel upbeat. Another day you might have an hour feeling sad, an hour feeling angry, an hour feeling a bit apathetic. And what's the point? But actually, it's the brain's way of processing big things like loss. And when you have cancer, it's that loss of control, loss of your health. It might be loss of your work. Sometimes it means loss of relationship, very sadly, for some people. And your brain is processing it. That's why you go through all of these emotions. And then people tend to find that they can start to reorganize their life. And amazingly, and very movingly, actually, for me, I work with people in hospice care that were at the end of their life, but had an acceptance, but also a hope, and making the most of the time they'd got and how they were going to prepare for that. So, we know that not everybody fantastically now like they did when I was young. It's not the diagnosis of death anymore, which is wonderful. But actually, lots of people can find an acceptance of this has happened to me, rather than why has this happened to me. So don't be surprised whether yourself or the person that has the cancer, sometimes you feel like, oh my goodness, how are they going to be today? It's a very normal process. Managing setbacks, it's my last slide, Shara. So just so you know, they're inevitable. We get tired, we get stressed, we get upset, we get angry, we get frustrated. I can do all of those in a day, even cancer-free. An apology goes a long way. I'm sorry I took it out on you. I'm not really angry at you. I'm just having a bad day. Explain how you were feeling, and don't be afraid to explain what made you feel that way. I'm sorry, I'm snappy today. I'm feeling quite anxious about this new tablet, or I'm feeling quite anxious because I don't like MRIs and I find them quite claustrophobic. For those of you that are patients, remember that your supporters aren't perfect either. Nobody signs up for this journey. They haven't been on a course that suddenly tells them how to be wonderfully supportive. They've probably got their own struggles and worries and concerns. So sometimes they might be angry and stressed and frustrated. It doesn't mean that they don't love and care for you. It just means that it's a big weight for any relationship. And are you upset at the other person, or are you upset at cancer? Thank you so much for listening. It's really hard to talk about relationships in a time that I'm supposed to have left time for questions and answers, for which I apologise. This is us here. If you're in the UK, although we work a lot in the Midlands area, if you can't get services in your area, we have supported out of area. But even if you're in other countries, there's lots of good information and resources and ideas on our website. Thank you so much all for making the time to come. And wherever you are, You know, I hope you have a pleasant evening, morning, or afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have time to answer some questions?
I
Because
do if you do. I'm really conscious of the time.
we definitely do. A few people have left, but most people have stayed, and there's quite a few questions, so it'd be nice. It's
I'll
really up to you if you
do
can.
my best.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So the first question we've got Pam who has asked. This is quite it's very well. They're all very important questions. This is, how do I respond to a friend who doesn't believe how difficult cancer is? I've got skin cancer, stage 2 melanoma, and they can't seem to understand how I feel. They believe once it's cut out, it's gone. It's not as serious as other cancers. They're also in some sort of denial about it.
Yeah,
So
I
it's very
think,
hard. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's the problem. I think sometimes people go into denial because they can't handle it. You know, one of the things is that, you know, some people find, some people say to me, I don't know how you work in cancer care, and I really enjoy it. Not everybody copes well with facing the reality. And sometimes when you have a cancer, they minimize it because if it's happened to you, it could happen to them. And it's a bit overwhelming. We get this an awful lot. People will say, when I get the all clear, people think I can just pick up life like nothing's happened. And that doesn't happen either. You know, oh, you've been operated on now. Oh, it's been cut out. I think all you can do is almost use the broken record technique with your friend. You know, actually, yeah, I've had the operation. It might have been cut out. Yes, there might be stage 3 and stage 4 and other cancers that are very difficult. But for me, this has been a very difficult journey, and I found this really difficult and challenging. And I think we have to sometimes just be authentic and honest. We don't have control over how somebody receives it. But what we tend to do then is go, oh, well, I won't say anything because I don't want to hear it. If it was me, I would still give the honest response. But unfortunately, sometimes when people are like this, I think it's because they can't face the reality of cancer, because if it's happened to their friend, it might happen to them.
Hmm. Okay. So I've got another question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one. Is my husband is autistic and finds it hard. How do I deal with that?
I can.
Oh,
Um, I work a lot with neurodiversity. I have a lot of neurodiversity in my family. It's really difficult. One of the things is you've got to keep it concrete and not literal. Sometimes people with autism don't understand that this is weighing me down. It's a really heavy load. They can't understand some of the analogies that we might use about how we're feeling. Um, what I would say is people, and again, I'm generalizing, so it's a big spectrum, but people with autism can get very overwhelmed and they can't deal with it, and they'll shut off or they'll shut themselves away. You have to do it in drip feeding and not too much information at all. Watch for his reactions, watch when enough's enough, and be really clear and concrete about what you're saying. I would imagine that potentially they struggle with empathizing. So you have to remember that. So we've just pinged, and I don't know why we pinged, so I'm just going to press the charger in because it's in. Um, so it's in. Don't know why that's going off. So sorry. So I think you know, he's not suddenly going to be able to empathize if that's something he struggles with, but just small amounts of key information. And it's yeah, I have family members very close to me with Asperger's and autism, and sometimes it can feel very hurtful because they don't always give the response that you want, and they can be quite blunt. But they're not doing it because they don't care. That's just how the brain processes things. So it's easy to say, but don't take it to heart too much if the response seems insensitive, because sometimes they don't know what to say and how to respond.
I'm going to keep asking the questions, but if the people who Sarah's responded to want to respond and let us know if your question's been answered or anything like that, that would be great. So our next question is, how can I help my husband my relationship with my husband, I have cancer. He's trying to help, but he's just irritating me. I don't want him at the appointments and asking questions. Is that bad?
No, not at all.
Huh.
Not at all. And it's setting some boundaries and some communication. But again, it's about how you say it. It's like, actually, I would like to be the person doing the main talking. So if you've got questions, could you leave them right till the end so that I can have my time? It might be saying, this is something that I really appreciate your support with, but I feel that, for me, it works better for me going to the appointments by myself. I'll take some notes, I'll feedback. I understand it's irritating. What he's probably trying to do is get a sense of control. If he's asking all the questions and he's finding out all the information, he's probably trying to get control, and he probably doesn't know how to help you, and this is his way. So yes, I can understand that would be very irritating, but it may be being done out of a good place. But this is your journey, and it's about you making some choices and decisions.
Mm. And our last question, unless anybody else has any questions, is there a best way to communicate my needs?
I think you just have to be as honest as you can, depending on who you're speaking to. So generally, I would say, just be clear and just be honest. Today, I have a lot of pain in my leg. I'm managing it. I might need to put my leg up. It's making me feel a bit irritable. However, as we've just seen with that previous question, if you've got neurodiversity or it's a child or a younger person, you might need to adjust how much you say. What I think about communicating our needs is we need to sort of do it at the immediate time where we can. So, at that time, this is what I need. But we have to be really careful about not giving a huge long list, because people switch off and then they forget. So it might be, okay, so my needs for today are, in this appointment, I would like to do the talking and for you to keep the questions to the end. And I need you to bring the car around and use the Jeep because it's easier for me to get into, rather than I need. It's best communicated where you can in those situations or just before those situations. And also, what I would say about that is ask what their needs are as well. So this is what I need, but what is it that you need? And actually, sometimes don't forget that the person closest to you may not be the best person to meet those needs. So if you've got a friend, like the lady said earlier, who is clearly not coping with it, not saying the right things, and you need to talk about it and have empathy, you might actually not go to them for a coffee. You might pick your other friend who's much more empathic and doesn't perhaps say things like, oh, well, it's cut out and it's okay. So, most people don't get all their needs met from one person. It's kind of what we think we will when we're in romantic relationships. We put a lot on other people. So it might be that your husband's great for practical support. It might be that your friend's great for a listening ear. It might be that your mother-in-law is the best person to choose wigs for you because she's got a level of honesty. So you'll come away with something that, you've got a really honest opinion with. But I think, each situation on its merit, and don't overwhelm somebody with the whole long list. Try and keep it situational.
Wow. I'm sitting there listening to you and thinking maybe I should have some counselling anyway about how to deal with people. I mean, I'm not. My cancer is in the path, thank goodness. But there's so much. I mean, this isn't really just cancer, isn't it? It's about how to deal with people in general and life and
broader. But I will say that, one of the things that I find really interesting is actually people don't always come for counselling during the cancer. The key moment that people often come, because when you're a patient, you've got your appointments and your key structure and your oncologist, and my gosh, some of our patients are so busy, that 3 times a week sometimes, and they're not always local. Actually, when often people come is when life has gone back to normal, and everybody thinks that you've just resumed and picked up your life and you've gone back to how it was. Actually, that's often when the brain starts to process what you've been through. So
Mm,
it's
mm,
quite the wrong time to come for counselling
mm.
in any situation. Sometimes it's not when you're going through it, it's sometimes the after journey that
Yes.
I'm in for.
And
But
people are neglected then as well, I think they feel
oh,
after
yeah,
the
yes,
general.
absolutely. You know,
Mm.
lots of attention and then everybody drifts away, don't they?
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
that's
Wow. Well, thank you so much. That's been a lot for me to think about. I don't know if there's any other questions or if you want to make a comment. So I'm very aware that we have gone over time, but there's so much to think about and talk about.